Hey team, we're not going to muck around today with fantastical gameplay in the background because this update is both too important to overlook or ignore. We have a very crucial roadmap that we're going to use throughout most of this video, but also there are some complexities and frustrations within it that I felt, and I'm hoping to provide a little bit of extra clarity on top of what they've already discussed. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the post-release plans for Victoria 3. What will the future free updates 1.4, 1.5 and beyond contain? And there's of course a focus like they had on the previous roadmaps with some key categories as they list them here: military, historical immersion, diplomacy, and internal politics, with an other section handily sitting across the side for anything that doesn't quite fit in the box. The first of 5 bullet points for their 4 categories here is done. It's of course an exception. Something being done doesn't mean that they're never going to expand on it again, but it's not a high priority. Any points that were already marked as done in the previous update have been removed from the list to avoid it growing unmanageably long, and of course that makes sense. This is a focus of future free updates, so anything that's already been done literally doesn't fit the brief of this document. See ya. The actual categories then start to follow, or at least so we think. Firstly, there's updated. This is part of the game where they've made improvements and changes that they wanted to make, but they're not yet satisfied with where it stands and they plan to add things in future. This section will mainly focus on updates made in 1.3, so most recent. Then the category not updated. This is part of the game where we haven't yet released any of our planned changes and any currently released updates. This is stuff that's still to come. Then there's a new categorization. A planned change or improvement that's been newly added, i.e. it wasn't present last time they listed what they wanted to do with the game. And then finally, reconsidered. A previously planned change or improvement that we made, or may have reconsidered our approach to how to tackle it from previous updates. So they've gone back to the drawing board a little bit. Okay, those are the categorizations. Now let's take a look at how it plays out on the roadmap. And this is where it gets a little bit weird. Now, don't get me wrong, the information here is still really useful and we're definitely going to go through and talk about the changes, but I really feel a need to provide some clarity up front because firstly, on the legend, there is a complete category. At the risk of stating the obvious, that is exactly the same as done. They're not all new, though there could maybe be an argument that because some of them or all of them weren't included on a list last time, that therefore they should be put here. I believe because it's a focus of future free updates, we should focus on the future free updates. Secondly, the first category, not yet updated / new. Okay, not yet updated, sure, that kind of makes sense. But then when you look at the list, there is, granted, only one, but there is one thing here that is new and not part of that category. New seems to be applied actually as more of a caveat, an afterthought, onto things that are new, which is probably the way it should be. So I'd encourage you to ignore the /new because it's not always the case. There may be something new that isn't labeled that color. It's for this reason that at least I found it most useful to disregard that new up in the map's legend. I don't think it's helpful. I think the news written on the text are more helpful because of course there could be something that color and there are many things that just aren't new. So in my slightly redefined legend, we've changed not yet updated / new to no progress. These are things that they have made no progress on to date. Secondly, updated, not complete, is more to do. They've worked on it a bit, there's more to do. Thirdly, reconsidered is also more to do. They've changed their mind a little bit since the last version of this post-release roadmap came out, but fundamentally, the outcome is the same. There's more to do. And then finally, complete, which I didn't think was going to be included on here at all, but it is. We'll just call that done. And there are a few things that they've put on the list that are already done, including, interestingly, that one that is both new and done, just to let us know that they did it. And I kind of, I kind of relate to that. Like, sometimes if I'm waking up in the morning writing a to-do list, I might put something like, get out of bed. And then as I'm sitting at my desk, tick that box. It makes me feel good. I can already tick something off my list. And I jest, but that's kind of what's playing out there. Now that I've just slightly come to terms with the legend and what it actually means, we can now quickly go through and look at each one of these bullet points and quickly associate it with whether they've done anything at all, whether they've got more to do, or whether they consider it done. 3 clear-cut categories. Okay, so moving on from their roadmap, the first category that they've got on it is called Warfare. That is, of course, in this developer diary referred to as military, fairly straightforward. First up, done. What have they done? Well, most recently they added the field promotion ability to prevent armies going home after generals died at war. Fairly straightforward, and a much needed fix, actually, very much. Now we move through into what they're calling updated. These are our more to do categories, okay? Things that are actually part of a future update, not a long list of what they've already done. Improve the ability of players to get an overview of their military situation and expose more data. This is an area they'd like to continually add improvements to. A particular area they've identified is the need to more clearly be able to see a summary of a country's military strength instead of just seeing its units. Secondly, something else I'd like to make more progress on, there's more to do, is increasing the visibility of navies, making admirals easier to work with, 100% agree. They want to improve the sense of where exactly your navy is and what exactly it's doing, because it is at the moment kind of like you just click on a sea route and hope for the best. And then finally, the other thing that they've listed as having more to do, but it's been long running, is finding solutions for the issue where theaters can split into multiple or dozens of tiny fronts. They've mitigated the issue in Update 1.2, they argue, by auto-closing small pockets and improving battle province selection. But it still persists, especially in large wars with a large number of small countries. So they keep needing to improve that. And now we get to the interesting stuff, the things that they've not yet updated or are new. My simplification, no progress has been made on these yet. But of course, we can look forward to it in future. Firstly, they want to add a system for limited wars to reduce the number of early game global wars between the great powers. They want to add systems for organizing generals and admirals into discrete armies and navies to give us more control over their geographic positioning, how they're made up, and what they specialize in. They want to add more options for strategic control over how our generals allow for smart play in wars. And then finally, adding more on-map graphics for armies and navies, including the soldiers themselves on the map. These ones are, of course, the most juicy because they are things where no progress has been made. Many of them, 3 out of 4, are new. Reducing the number of early game total wars between great powers is not, but regardless, these are the things that we should most look forward to out of this warfare section. And I think that there will be some improvements there that the community's been calling for. Overall, you could summarize it as more visibility for our armies and generals, both on the map and how we engage with them. Seems like a positive improvement to me. And lastly, and in fact the only instance of something on this that is considered under their category reconsidered, is experimenting with controlled front splitting for longer fronts. After some internal design consideration, we've decided that this is not the best approach going forward. Instead, we'll aim to solve the issues with long fronts by supporting multiple battles and improving the strategic options you have to direct your generals. And again, just to reiterate, that's a section where, much like the other, they have more work to do. Now let's move to historical immersion. There is one new entry to this list under the no progress yet made category, of course, going through the base game journal entries and events and making improvements and additions to ensure that they feel meaningful and impactful for players to interact with. So this one doesn't really offer a lot of substance. We don't know what entries, where, how, why, but they have proven already quite a good focus on this, quite a strong focus on attempting to add more flavor to nations. So that one is a new entry on the historical immersion list. And then there are 4 yellow items, which are more to do. That is, of course, one of them that I've already read out. The other 3 are listed here in the developer's diary as updated. Again, a reminder, that means there's more to be done. Firstly, tweaking content such as the Meiji Restoration, Alaska Purchase, and so on, so that it can work in a way that can more frequently be successfully performed by the AI through a mix of AI improvements and content tweaks. And they have made some of these already, 1.2, 1.3, but they have some more planned work here, particularly for the Meiji Restoration and the willingness of AI countries to open up Japan. Secondly, with more work to be done, ensuring unifications like Italy, Germany, Canada don't constantly happen decades ahead of the historical schedule, and increasing the challenge of unifying Italy and Germany in particular. Totally agree with this one. They add a little bit more devil in the detail by saying that the German unification received a rework in 1.3, fairly significant, to more closely follow history, with other unifications planned to receive that same kind of treatment. And the final thing that they have more work to do is general AI tweaks, to have AI countries play in a more believable, immersive way, something they continuously are working on. Some tweaks were made in 1.3, but the biggest improvements here, they say, should come alongside planned updates to diplomacy, which is a wonderful segue through, of course, into the next section. Importantly, though, to finally note, they want to add more country, state, and region-specific content to enhance historical flavor. And that is kind of basically all of these points can summarize themselves down into that. We want historical flavor and accuracy. On diplomacy, using their legend, all of it falls under the same category of not yet updated / new, although it's important to note that in this one, nothing is new. First and foremost, add reverse swaying, the ability to offer to join a side in a play in exchange for something else, much needed. Secondly, add more things to offer in diplomatic plays. Thirdly, add the option to trade states, or maybe even give them away at least. Fourth, add foreign investment and some form of construction in other countries. And fifthly, improve and expand on interactions with and from subjects. And finally, allow peace deals to be negotiated during a diplomatic play. That's how it reads on the post-release roadmap, and broadly speaking, the same information can be seen in the developer's diary. For internal politics, though, we should pay closer attention to the developer's diary text itself, because it has both an extra bullet point and more detail. In terms of the post-release map plan, though, you can basically see that as far as internal politics is concerned, there are only 2 points on the roadmap that are considered more to do under our framework, and the rest of them are done. So let's have a look. What have they done already? Well, they've improved mechanics of law enactment and revolutions to be more engaging. Absolutely they have. The new staged approach with 1.3 very much changed that and did make it more engaging. Less random, more events going into it. Secondly, they've added more mechanics for characters and given the player more reason to care about individual characters in their country. Agitators, for example, a great example of that, and character interactions more broadly. Finally, internal politics that we're done and dusted with added petitions to ensure interest groups you add to your government has agency in demanding political change. This was not previously on the list, but it is something we've added since we consider it a fairly significant change to internal politics. And that is the one that has new next to it. My favorite, put something on my to-do list that I've already done trick. I love it. Now, there are a few things that they call updated, a reminder that means there's more to be done. Making it more interesting and competitive, but also more challenging to play in a more conservative and autocratic style. They also have more work to do on the new laws that were introduced in 1.3, like the one-party state, that makes late-game autocracies more viable, and the addition of agitators means that conservative countries now face a greater internal push for reforms. To me, that kind of reads like something that's already done. I don't see anything in that sentence that says they want to do more of anything or introduce something else alongside of it. So I'm not quite sure, other than to perhaps suggest that they want to keep making autocracies more viable and challenging. Not sure. But what I do know is that the last point on the list is something that is to be done, more to do. Adding laws that expand on diversity of countries and introduce new ways to play the game. And I suppose the previous bullet point, while it's under a list of more things to do, is actually kind of just an example. So it would read, we want to add more laws that expand diversity of countries and introduce new ways to play the game, like we did in 1.3 with the one-party state law. That's my interpretation of that anyway. And last but not least, the always neglected other category. Here there are 2 new things that they've of course made no progress on yet, and one thing that they have more to do, aka updated. Let's have a look at that one first. Improving alerts and the current situation widget to provide more useful and actionable information. The current situation widget received a series of tweaks in 1.3 to give more useful and actionable stuff. In the future, they want to improve it by giving the player more custom control over the alert current situation system. The final 2 things are, of course, new and completely fresh. What do they want to do in the other? Firstly, increase the overall challenge in the economic core loop, the core economic loop of the game, as well as creating more clear mechanical differences between countries and their starting positions in ways that encourage more economic specialization. There's quite a bit in that. My take is essentially we want to make the core economic function, the core economic loop of the game, a bit more difficult, and we want to add more differences and nuances between countries and how they start so that they can be different from one another, specialize in different parts of the economy, in different economic activity. Again, kind of like adding more flavor to nations. Secondly, they want to find a way to deal with the excessive fiddliness of the trade system in large economies, possibly by allowing for autonomous trade based on your laws in a similar way to the autonomous investment system. I think that's a great idea. Anything that frustrates a player is generally bad. And if the system has been deemed excessively fiddly by people and they want a way to automate it, that's great. Do take care though, because you might just find that the entire thing is automated. I jest. That'll be a good move, I'm sure. And now let's read directly from the source to see how they conclude. So when can you expect these changes to reach the game? I can't give specifics for any particular points, but what I can say is that we're planning a large update with an extended open beta period in the second half of this year, which will check off a considerable number of points on the list. In particular, that update will be aiming to tackle many of the points from the warfare, military, and diplomacy sections on the list. I'll end this dev diary by reminding you yet again that this list only covers changes and additions that will be free. That's it for today's update. They'll see us in 2 weeks' time, which is now slightly less than that, on the 22nd, while they work on the future patch 1.3.3. In summary, and don't let my seemingly heightened sassiness today put you off, I think that this is a very good list of reasonable and solid improvements that will roll out for free in Victoria 3. So I can't fault it in that regard. I do hope, though, that we see more than just one update, even if it is a big update with an extended beta. If there's only going to be one update for the rest of this year, which of course they haven't yet confirmed, then that means we're probably not going to see another one for at least 7-8 months by the time we get through the holiday period. I hope that Victoria 3 continues to see the same amount of love and care and attention that it has seen, ideally even more. But of course, we'll have to sit back and wait and see. I hope you enjoyed my slight recharacterization of the roadmap as well. It at least helped me understand it a little bit easier. And I, my friends, will see you next time.